Well, hey, everybody, Pastor Steve Hogg here, and thank you so much for joining me for these devotions. I just pray God is richly blessing you as you engage with His Word, grow as a disciple, and become more like Christ in our own mission with Jesus. Remember, we define a disciple as someone who is following Jesus, being changed or transformed by Jesus, and is on mission with Jesus. And that's the reason, last year, and we're keeping it this year, our theme was and is Jesus is too good to keep to yourself. And this year we added to it the theme that praying for the harvest begins or starts with me. So I'm praying for the harvest and I'm sharing Jesus because, hey, I just can't keep him to myself. We don't want to keep Jesus to ourselves. So you be praying for opportunities today to invite someone to church, opportunities today to share the gospel, talk about Jesus and boldness to speak, and then invite people, pray for people by name. So let's get busy. Time is passing. Jesus is going to come back. The judgment is real, and we want as many people as possible to be saved. So let's do what we're put here to do. All right, Genesis chapter 19. If Genesis 18, as I said yesterday, is in many ways a beautiful chapter, Genesis 19 is the opposite. It's sordid. It's sad. In my journal, I wrote with exclamation points, wicked, wicked, wicked. You have here the story of the destruction of Sodom. And I want us to read verses 4 through 9, okay? 4 through 9. Before they lay down, this is the angels who had been with the pre-incarnate Christ that met with Abraham yesterday in chapter 18. They make their way, these two angels do, to Sodom. And it's obvious from the stories that they had the appearance of a man because they can do that. And so they go to Lot's house, and before they go to bed, in verse 4, now, before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, surrounded the house, both young and old, all the people from every quarter. They called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we might have or may have relations with them," homosexual relations. But Lot went out to them at the doorway and shut the door behind him. And he said, "Please, my brothers, do not act wickedly." Verse 8, now, behold, I have two daughters who have not had relations with men. Please let me bring them out to you, and do to them whatever you like. Man, can you imagine how his daughters felt? Only do nothing to these men, inasmuch as they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, "Stand aside." Furthermore, they said, this one came in as an alien, talking about Lot. He came in an outsider, and he's trying to tell us what to do, acting like our judge, which is the way people criticize Christians all the time. Now we will treat you worse than them. And so they pressed hard against Lot and came near to break the door. And of course, the angels grabbed Lot and pulled him back in, and they blind the men. In chapter 18, verse 21, the chapter we looked at yesterday, the Lord told Abraham about Sodom. He said, "I will go down now and see if they have done entirely according to the outcry which has come up to me, and if not, I will know." And so he's checking it out. But in verse 20, here's what he's checking out. The Lord said, "The outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is indeed great, and their sin is exceedingly grave." Not just have they sinned a lot, their sin, God said, is exceedingly grave. Now, there are some who deny that homosexual behavior or conduct is sinful. And they go to the Bible and reinterpret every Bible passage that talks about homosexual behavior in a way to say, no, it really isn't condemning the homosexual lifestyle, homosexual sex or activity. And what they say here is the sin was not homosexuality, but gang rape of a homosexual nature, but it was gang rape, and that was the sin. Okay, both can be true. Was there a gang rape component to this? Yeah. But it was also a homosexual component. And the sin that they were guilty of existed before this episode that could look like gang rape. So the idea that the only thing going on here is gang rape is no. That it's just one of many, many, many sins, including homosexual behavior. Jude 7 in the New Testament says, "Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them since they in the same way as these indulged in gross immorality and went after strange flesh. That's a biblical way of saying homosexual behavior. Strange flesh is a man wanting to sleep with a man and a woman sleep with a woman rather than the way God intended when he created us as male and female. So Jude makes it clear it's homosexual behavior. Could it be rape with that? Yes, but it's still homosexual behavior that is condemned as well. It's not just that. It's so homosexuality and sexual violence were part of the sins, but there were more sins than that. Ezekiel tells us in the Old Testament in chapter 16, verses 49 and 50, behold, this was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had arrogance, abundant food, ceaseless ease, but she did not help the poor and needy. Thus they were haughty and committed abominations before me. So there were multiple sins. It was they were successful and they were arrogant and they were cocky and they were guilty of all kinds of greed and not helping the poor. But they were also guilty of all these sexual sins. You think about America, we're guilty of all those things. Isaiah, the prophet, in chapter 3, verse 9, talking about Jerusalem and the nation of Judah, said they display their sin like Sodom. They do not even conceal it. In other words, the sins of the people in Jerusalem and beyond in Isaiah's day was very public. He said that's how it was in Sodom, very public. And Jeremiah, Isaiah, even Jesus in the Gospels, they all use Sodom as an example of gross sin and an example of a refusal to receive the message of God and refusal to receive the messengers of God. Sodom was guilty of many sins, including homosexual behavior. And if others were injured, so be it. And they made a public display of it. They weren't ashamed of their sins. Sounds like America, doesn't it? And I think about the damage being done to children today in the name of some of this gross immorality that's taking place in our country. You see, sin begets more sin. It leads to addiction. It leads to arrogance toward God, arrogance toward the Word of God. Sin emboldens people, emboldens them to publicly display their sin, and ultimately it becomes destructive. And when you look back over the last 5 decades in America, as the culture gradually shifted to calling what God says is sinful, the culture calls it normal, natural. Sin is emboldened, becomes more and more and more and more public, resulting in more and more destroyed lives. One last thing, kind of a devotional thought, verse 29 of chapter 19. Thus it came about when God destroyed the cities of the valley, talking about Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns, that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot lived. Remember, God sent the angels and they rescued Lot and his family. What verse 29 is saying is that the reason God rescued Lot, it had nothing to do with Lot. Lot did not deserve rescuing. Lot was rescued. God did it as a favor to Abraham. That's what verse 29 says. And America doesn't realize it. But I think the only thing keeping this country afloat is the blessings of God because of his righteous people. And the culture may laugh at us, belittle us, attack us, call us all kinds of names, think we are ignorant and mean and so on. But the righteous people of God are the only reason God has not allowed this country to be destroyed as of yet. That's the takeaway. I'll see you tomorrow as we continue this journey by looking at chapter 20 in the book of Genesis. God bless you, everybody.